The gunshot cracked through the night like a bone snapping, and Anna Yates pressed herself flat against the rough timber wall of the barn, her breath coming in shallow, frantic pulls. Outside, the boots of 3 men crunched across the gravel yard of the Kendrick ranch, and she could hear their voices low and deliberate, the kind of voices men used when they had already decided what they were going to do and were only working out the details of how. Her fingers found the sleeve of the man beside her in the darkness, and she pulled at it without thinking, the way a drowning person pulls at anything solid. "I am scared," she whispered, and the words barely made a sound. They were so tight with fear, so stripped of everything except the raw truth of them. Oliver Kendrick did not hesitate. He did not tell her everything was going to be fine, because he was not a man who offered comfort he could not guarantee. He turned his head, and even in the near-total darkness she could sense the steadiness of him, that particular quality of stillness that she had noticed the first afternoon she arrived in Redemption Creek, when everyone else in town was watching her with speculation, and he simply watched her with quiet attention. "Then hold on to me," he said, and she did. She gripped the solid warmth of his forearm with both hands, and he shifted his body so that he was between her and the barn door. And for one suspended moment, the entire weight of the past 3 weeks came crashing down on her at once. All the hidden motives and the betrayals and the terrible forced choice she had been running from since she left St. Louis in the second week of September 1882. 3 weeks earlier, Anna Yates had stepped off the southbound stage in Redemption Creek, Texas, carrying a single leather traveling bag, a small cedar box that she kept locked and never set down, and a secret that she had told no one, not a living soul, not since the night her employer insent. Louis had died and left her with nothing but the evidence of what had gotten him killed. The town of Redemption Creek was not much to look at. It sat in a wide basin between 2 low ridges of scrub-dotted limestone, the kind of place the land tolerates rather than invites. There was a main street with the essential businesses arranged along it like teeth in a jaw. A general store run by a man named Calloway who had the deeply suspicious eyes of someone who had overcharged people so long he assumed everyone was calculating the same. There was a livery, a post office that doubled as a telegraph office, a saloon called the Dusty Ace that smelled of sawdust and old tobacco from 10 feet away, and a modest hotel called the Pico's Arms, where the wallpaper was peeling in strips, and the mattresses suggested they had lived more interesting lives than their current tenants. Anna had come to Redemption Creek in response to a classified notice in the St. Louis Dispatch, advertising for a schoolteacher for the township's small school, which served the children of ranchers and tradespeople within a 15-mile radius. She had her teaching certificate from the Missouri State Normal School, which she had earned 2 years prior at the age of 22. The notice had offered room and board at the Pico's Arms, a modest monthly salary, and the particular promise of distance, though that last part was her own reading of the advertisement, the one thing she needed most that was not printed there. The stage driver helped her bag down, tipped his hat, and drove on without ceremony. She stood in the street with the afternoon sun hammering at her shoulders and looked at the town and told herself this was a beginning, not a continuation. She told herself the secret she was carrying would stay buried if she was careful. She told herself that no one in this red dust basin of West Texas had any reason to look for her. She was wrong about that last part, but she would not know it for another 2 weeks. The first person to speak to her was Mrs. Eunice Pratt, who ran the Pico's Arms and who appeared on the front step before Anna had crossed half the street, as though she had been watching from the window. Mrs. Pratt was a compact woman in her mid-50s with iron-gray hair pinned back with a severity that suggested it was meant as a warning to the hair, and her initial assessment of Anna Yates was conducted with the thoroughness of a customs inspection. "You are the new teacher," Mrs. Pratt said. It was not a question. "Anna Yates," Anna said and put out her hand. Mrs. Pratt shook it briefly. "You are younger than I expected. The last teacher we had was 43 and built like a fence post. Children respected her. I have been told I am harder to underestimate than I appear, Anna said. Mrs. Pratt studied her for a moment longer, then the corner of her mouth moved in a way that might have been approval. Well, come in then. Supper is at 6 and I do not keep plates warm. The school was a single-room building at the edge of town, chinked log construction with 4 windows and a cast-iron stove that would be essential once October arrived. It had 23 pupils ranging from 6 to 14 years of age, and they regarded Anna on her first morning with the particular combination of boredom and predatory anticipation that children bring to any new adult authority figure. She handled them the same way she handled most challenges, by paying close attention to what they actually needed rather than performing what they expected, and within a week she had their grudging interest, which was better than their hostility. She met Oliver Kendrick on her 4th day in Redemption Creek. She had gone to the general store for chalk and an ink block, and he was at the counter ahead of her, settling an account in a slow, methodical way that suggested he kept careful track of things. She noticed his hands first, the way she always noticed hands, large and scarred in the particular way of men who worked with wire and rope and rough timber, but precise in their movements, deliberate. He wore a gray linen shirt, dust-colored trousers, and a wide-brimmed hat that he removed when he turned and found her waiting behind him. He was perhaps 28 or 29, with a face that had been weathered by outdoor living into something that would have been merely handsome in softer circumstances, but was in fact quietly compelling in the way that things made strong by difficulty often are. His eyes were a dark amber brown, and they took her in with an attention that was thorough but not rude, the eyes of a man who had learned that details matter. "Miss Yates," he said, and she was startled because she had not introduced herself. "You know who I am," she said. "Small town," he said simply. "I'm Oliver Kendrick. I run the Double K Ranch about 8 miles east." "The Kendrick Ranch," she said. "2 of your hand's children are in my school, the McCready boys." "My foreman's boys," he said. "Good kids." "Loud, exceptionally loud," she agreed. He almost smiled. It was a careful, considered thing, that almost smile, as though he was deciding whether the moment warranted it, and she found herself unexpectedly charmed by the deliberateness of it. He stepped aside to let her reach the counter, and when Calloway appeared from the back room, Oliver said, "Put Miss Yates' school supplies on my account," and walked out before she could object. She told herself it was a civic gesture, the kind of thing a prominent rancher did for community institutions. She told herself it meant nothing at all. She thought about it for the rest of the day. Oliver Kendrick was, by the account of everyone in Redemption Creek who had an opinion, which was everyone, the most eligible and most unavailable man in the county. He had come to the Double K 7 years prior, at 21, having purchased the land with money whose origins were considered either admirably industrious or suspiciously swift, depending on who was telling the story. He had built the ranch from raw land into a prosperous operation running 1,200 head of cattle. He employed 11 men, paid them fairly by all accounts, and treated the Comanche and Apache trading parties that occasionally passed through his land with a respect that was unusual enough in 1882 to be remarked upon. He had never married. This fact occupied an enormous amount of conversational real estate among the women of Redemption Creek and the surrounding ranches, and various explanations had been offered over the years, ranging from a tragic lost love to a simple disinclination toward matrimony, none of which appeared to be based on anything more solid than speculation. When Anna asked Mrs. Pratt about it, in the oblique way she had learned to ask questions when she did not want her interest to be too apparent, Mrs. Pratt said simply, "Oliver Kendrick has never met a woman worth slowing down for." His words, not mine, though I happen to think they reflect a reasonable standard. It was a Thursday afternoon in late September, 10 days after Anna arrived in Redemption Creek, when her carefully constructed sense of safety began to crack. She was crossing the street from the schoolhouse to the post office to collect her mail. a habit she had established early because she was expecting a letter from her sister in Kansas City, and because it gave her a reason to check whether any communications had arrived that she did not want, the kind that might originate from St. Louis and carry a return address that did not belong there. She was watching the street with the particular quality of attention she had trained herself to maintain, the awareness of a woman who had learned that ordinary moments can turn over without warning. She nearly walked past the man before she registered him. He was leaning against the post outside Callaway's store, a solidly built man in a black coat, with a face she recognized the way you recognize something from a nightmare, with the body before the mind catches up. His name was Dodd, just Dodd. He had never offered a first name in the 3 months she had known him in St. Louis, and he had worked for her late employer, Mr. Gerald Harmon, in a capacity that she had understood to be financial and had later understood to be something considerably darker. He had not seen her yet. She kept walking, maintained her pace, turned into the narrow alley between the post office and the barber's shop, and stood with her back against the wall and her heart hammering so hard she could feel it in her teeth. She forced herself to breathe slowly, to count to 20, to think. The cedar box in her room at the Pico's Arms contained a ledger. Not her ledger, not anything she had sought out or wanted. The ledger of Gerald Harmon's dealings over a period of 4 years, which she had discovered tucked behind a loose board in the wall of his office on the night of his death, 3 hours before the men who had killed him arrived to search the premises. She had taken it because she did not know what else to do with it, because leaving it felt like leaving something explosive in a room full of children, and because, even in her shock and grief, she had known that the information in those pages was the kind that powerful men would do terrible things to recover. Gerald Harmon had been a good employer and a complicated man. He had paid her fairly for her secretarial work, treated her with professional respect, and apparently used his import business as a front for a scheme of land fraud and financial corruption that implicated 3 county officials, 2 state legislators, a federal land agent, and a man named Callum Brace, who was, according to an article she had seen 2 weeks before Harmon's death, currently campaigning for a seat in the Missouri Senate. The ledger documented all of it, in Harmon's careful hand, dates and amounts and names, the kind of record that only a meticulous man keeps, the kind of record that becomes a liability the moment the keeper of it can no longer control who sees it. Dodd being in Redemption Creek could mean only one thing. Someone somehow had connected her to the ledger's disappearance. They had found her. Not conclusively, not yet, because if they were certain, Dodd would not be leaning against a post watching the street. He would be at the Pico's Arms. He was still looking, but he was looking in the right town. She collected herself, walked back to the school as though nothing had happened, sat at her desk, and spent the rest of the afternoon weighing her options with the cold precision of someone who had learned that panic was a luxury she could not afford. She could run again. She had the teaching position for another 3 weeks before she received her first salary payment, and without it, she had $11.40, which would not take her far. She could go to the local sheriff, a man named Boone who wore his authority with the comfortable ease of someone who had never truly been tested by it. But she did not know enough about Callum Brace's reach to trust that Boone was not connected, and the ledger named a federal land agent, which meant the corruption had tendrils she could not fully map. Or she could stay quiet, stay watchful, and try to understand exactly what Dodd knew before she made a decision that could not be undone. She chose the third option, which was the bravest and the most dangerous, and she went home that evening and ate Mrs. Pratt's supper of salt pork and beans with the careful appetite of someone performing normalcy, and she did not sleep until nearly 3 in the morning. The next afternoon, Oliver Kendrick appeared at the schoolhouse door. She was sweeping the floor after the children had left, and when she looked up and found him in the doorway with his hat in his hands and a slight uncertainty in his expression that she had not seen there before, She felt something shift in her chest, the particular internal movement of a person recognizing something true about themselves that they had been ignoring. "Mr. Kendrick," she said. "I thought I would see whether you needed anything," he said, and then apparently decided that was too vague because he added, "for the school, supplies or repairs or anything of that nature. I noticed the south window has a gap in the chinking." "It does," she said. "It lets in a draft." "I could fix that." "That would be kind," she said, and watched him cross the room to examine the window with the focused attention of a man who is using a practical task to manage a conversation he is not sure how to have. He pressed his fingers along the gap, assessed it, nodded. "I will bring mortar tomorrow," he said. He did not leave. She went back to sweeping. After a moment she said, without looking up, "Were you actually checking on the school, or were you checking on me?" The pause was half a breath long. "Both," he said. She looked up then. He was watching her with that careful, thorough attention that she had noticed in the general store, and there was something else in it now, a kind of tentative honesty, as though he had decided to stop being indirect and was not entirely sure how to do otherwise. "I heard a man arrived on the stage yesterday," he said quietly. "A man in a black coat who did not check into the Pico's arms and did not give his name to anyone who asked, and spent most of the afternoon watching the street." She felt the blood leave her face. "Mrs. Pratt mentioned it," Oliver continued. "She said he made her uneasy. She thought you should know." "Why would it concern me?" she said, and it came out too careful, too controlled, and she could see in his expression that he heard the control in it. "It might not," he said. "I do not know enough to say. I only know that you looked at the south window just now the way people look at things when they are thinking about something else entirely, and I have seen that expression before, and it usually means trouble is closer than it ought to be." She looked at him for a long moment. "You are observant," she said. "It is useful," he said. She was quiet for another moment, and then she put the broom against the wall and sat down in the teacher's chair, and he settled into one of the student desks, folding himself into it with the slight awkwardness of a large man in a small space, and she made a decision that she had not consciously reached but that arrived in her mind fully formed, the way the most important decisions often do. She did not tell him everything. She told him enough. She told him that she had come to Redemption Creek to put distance between herself and a situation in St. Louis that had become dangerous, that the man in the black coat was likely connected to that situation, and that she had information in her possession that certain people would very much like to recover. She did not tell him about the ledger specifically, or about Callum Brace, because she did not yet know enough about Oliver Kendrick to know whether his honesty was of the ordinary variety or the deeper, more costly kind. He listened without interrupting, which she appreciated. He asked 2 questions when she finished, both practical, neither of them the questions she had expected, which had been along the lines of why she had not gone to the law. Instead, he asked how many men she thought were looking for her and whether she believed she had been identified specifically or only tracked to the general area. "I think the area," she said. "If they were certain, it would already be different." He nodded slowly. "Then you have some time," he said. "Not much, but some." "I do not want to bring trouble to this town," she said. "The trouble is already here," he said simply. "The question is what we do with it." She noticed the pronoun. She let it sit between them without comment. He came back the next morning with the mortar and fixed the window gap, and while he worked she sat at her desk grading the composition exercises her students had turned in, and they talked, not about Dodd or the danger or the hidden ledger, but about ordinary things, the ranch, the school, the particular qualities of the land out here that she was still learning, the way the light in West Texas was different from Missouri light, thinner and sharper, like a blade rather than a blanket. He told her about a series of raids on the outlying cattle herds over the past 6 weeks, not Apache or Comanche work. He was clear about that, but organized rustling, a coordinated effort that suggested someone with a plan rather than individuals looking for opportunity. "Have you told the sheriff?" she asked. "Boone is a decent man in a bar fight," Oliver said, pressing mortar carefully into the gap with a tool that looked like a butter knife but wasn't. He is less useful with things that require sustained thought. She almost smiled at that. Over the following days, Oliver Kendrick became a presence in her life with a quiet inevitability that she might have resisted if she had not been so aware of needing something solid to hold on to. He stopped by the school in the afternoons on the pretext of various practical matters: a chair that needed repairing, a concern about the stovepipe, once with a crate of apples from the ranch's small orchard that he said were surplus, but that she suspected were not. He invited her to Sunday dinner at the ranch, along with the McCready family, his foreman Tom McCready and Tom's wife Helen and their 2 sons, and she went because Mrs. Pratt had the day she ate with her sister, and because she wanted to see where he lived. The Double K was everything the town was not. It sat on a wide, flat stretch of land with a low ridge to the north that broke the worst of the winter wind, and the buildings had been constructed with care, not the hasty improvisation of a man trying to establish territory, but the deliberate work of someone building something meant to last. The main house was single-story adobe and timber with a covered porch across the front and deep-set windows, and inside it was spare but not uncomfortable, the kind of house a solitary person keeps when they have taste but not vanity. She looked at his bookshelves, which occupied most of one wall, and felt something warm and unexpected move through her. "You read," she said, as though she was confirming something she had already half known. "It helps," he said, standing behind her close enough that she was aware of the heat of him. "It helps what?" she asked. "With the quiet," he said. "There is a lot of quiet out here." She looked at the spines, Shakespeare and Dickens and a survey of geology and 2 volumes of cattle management, and tucked at the end of one shelf, a small collection of poetry that she would not have predicted, Keats and one slim volume of Emily Dickinson that was more worn than the others. "Do you have a favorite?" she asked, and touched the Dickinson. "Several," he said. "Which is yours?" "Tell me yours first," she said. He reached past her and opened the Dickinson to a page with a small fold at the corner and read without looking at the text from memory, his voice quiet and without performance. "I dwell in possibility, a fairer house than prose, more numerous of windows, superior for doors." She stood very still. "That is mine also," she said. "That is exactly mine." He closed the book and did not move away immediately, and for a moment they were simply standing there, close together in the quiet of his house, with the afternoon light coming through the deep-set windows, and something passed between them that was not spoken and did not need to be. Helen McCready called them to dinner, and the moment dissolved, but it left a residue that neither of them addressed directly, the way a fire leaves heat in a stone long after the flame is out. On the 12th day after Anna arrived in Redemption Creek, she saw Dodd again. She was leaving the post office on a Wednesday evening when she caught the edge of him, the black coat, at the far end of the street. And this time he was talking to a man she did not recognize, a lean figure in a brown vest who had the organized, purposeful look of a man who had been sent to do a specific job rather than a general search. There were 2 of them now, and the way they were standing, angled toward each other in consultation rather than casual conversation, told her that the general search was narrowing. She walked back to the Pico's arms and sat on the edge of her bed and opened the cedar box and looked at the ledger for the first time in days. She had read it completely only once, the night she took it, and the reading had been like drinking something burning, necessary, and damaging. She knew what was in it. She knew what it was worth and what it would cost whoever held it if the wrong people found them holding it. She also knew, having thought about it carefully over the past 2 weeks, that the ledger's real value was not as a thing to be hidden, but as a thing to be used. The information in it was the kind that a federal prosecutor would find of considerable interest. The question had always been getting it to the right hands without being stopped along the way, and she had been afraid to move while she was alone. She was still afraid, but she was beginning to think that she did not have to be alone. She went to find Oliver Kendrick. He was at the livery, which was where Mrs. Pratt told her he usually was on Wednesday evenings, helping with a horse that had thrown a shoe on the ride in from the ranch. She found him in the second stall, crouched over the animal's rear leg, working with a focused calm that she had come to recognize as characteristic. This particular quality of his concentration, the way he gave whatever he was doing his complete attention and did not seem to require anyone to observe it. She waited until he was finished and had straightened up, and then she said his name and he turned and saw her expression and put the farrier's tool down. "Tell me," he said. She told him. All of it this time, the ledger and Gerald Harmon and Callum Brace and the names in those careful, damning pages, the land fraud and the corruption, and the reason someone had sent Dodd and his new companion to find her. She told him quickly and clearly, because she had spent 12 days deciding whether to trust him, and she had reached the decision, and she did not see the point of anything except directness. He listened with the same quality of attention he always brought, those amber-brown eyes steady on her face, not performing calm but genuinely possessing it, and when she finished he was quiet for a moment and then he said, "The ledger is at the Pico's Arms." "In the cedar box," she said, "under the floorboard beneath my bed." "You hid it under the floorboard and then put the box on top of the floorboard," he said. "The box is a decoy," she said. "If someone found the room and found the box, they would open it and find letters from my sister and a teaching certificate and be satisfied." He looked at her for a moment with something that was not quite a smile and not quite admiration but contained both. "You are not what I expected," he said, "when you first arrived." "What did you expect?" she said. "Someone passing through," he said. "Redemption Creek is not where people come to stay." "And now?" she asked. He considered this with his characteristic deliberateness. "Now I am not certain that is true," he said. They stood in the livery with the smell of hay and horses around them, and the evening light going golden outside the open doors, and she felt something she had not allowed herself to feel since she left St. Louis, the particular warmth of being known, of having told the truth to someone and had them stay. "I need to get the ledger to a federal authority," she said. "Someone with the jurisdiction and the will to act on it. I have been trying to think of how." "There is a federal circuit judge who comes through Abilene on the second week of every month," Oliver said. "October's circuit would be in 8 days. Abilene is over 200 miles from here." "Yes," he said. "Which means leaving tomorrow and riding hard." She looked at him. "You would come." "I would not let you go alone," he said, and there was nothing in his voice except simplicity, the matter-of-fact tone of a man stating something that is obvious to him. "It is not your trouble," she said. "Miss Yates," he said, and something in his voice made her be very still. "I have been looking for a reason to care about something for a long time. I have the ranch, and it is a good thing, and I am proud of it. But caring about a piece of land is not the same as caring about a person." He paused. "You are a person worth caring about." She could not speak for a moment. "You barely know me," she said finally. "I know enough," he said. "I know how you read. I know you hide your fear so that it does not inconvenience anyone. I know you memorized, 'I dwell in possibility,' and then pretended not to. I know you take the side of students who are being unfair to each other without making the one in the wrong feel ashamed." He looked at her steadily. "I know enough." Anna Yates had been self-sufficient by necessity for 4 years, since her parents died in the fever outbreak of 1878, and she had built that self-sufficiency into something she was proud of, a structure she lived inside. But structures can be prisons if you build the walls thick enough, and standing in the livery in the October evening of Redemption Creek, Texas, she felt the walls thin in a way that frightened her and that she did not want to stop. "All right," she said. "Tomorrow." They left before dawn, Oliver on his roan gelding, a steady horse named Gideon that she would come to know well over the next 8 days, and Anna on a mare borrowed from the livery, a small sorrel named Dutch, who had the slightly resentful temperament of an intelligent animal not in control of her own schedule. They took the southern trail east rather than the main road, Oliver's choice, and he explained without her asking that the main road had 2 choke points in the first 50 miles where 3 riders could hold up a large party indefinitely. "You have thought about this kind of thing before," she said. "I have thought about it since you told me about Dodd," he said. They rode in comfortable silence for the first 2 hours, which surprised her. She had expected the close company of travel to produce the forced conversation of people trying to fill space. But Oliver seemed to have made his peace with silence long ago and did not require it filled, which she found, as the morning light grew and the country opened up around them, deeply restful. They stopped at midday at a creek with a stand of cottonwoods that provided shade, and he produced from his saddlebags an organized collection of provisions that suggested he had been thinking about this trip before she had even asked him. Biscuits wrapped in cloth, dried beef, hard cheese, a small jar of peach preserves that struck her as an optimistic addition. "Peach preserves," she said. "From Helen McCready's pantry," he said. "She pressed them on me this morning when I stopped to tell Tom I would be away. She has very strong opinions about what constitutes adequate trail food. Mrs. McCready knows we have left. She knows I have left on business," he said. "She guessed the rest. Helen McCready's guessing is accurate to a degree that I find personally uncomfortable." Anna laughed, properly and without restraint, for the first time since she had left St. Louis, and the sound of it surprised her, as though she had not been sure she still could. Oliver looked at her with something unguarded in his face, something she had not seen there before. "You should do that more often," he said quietly. "Laugh," she said. "Whatever makes you do it," he said. They made camp that first night in a shallow gully with good sight lines in 3 directions. Oliver's choice again, the habit of a man who had learned to sleep in places where the geography worked in his favor. He built a small fire, efficient and smokeless by design, and they sat beside it while the sky above the Texas plain went through its extraordinary transformation from the gold and coral of sunset to the dense, crystalline darkness of a plains night, stars so thick and bright they seemed to have weight. She asked him about the dark past that Mrs. Pratt had hinted at without specifics, the 7 years ago purchase of the land and the money whose origins were discussed in town. He was quiet for a moment, turning a stick in the fire with the same deliberateness he brought to everything. "I worked for a cattle baron named Ike Holloway," he said, "for 3 years, starting when I was 18. Holloway ran his operation the way some men do out here, which is to say that he considered the law a suggestion applicable to other people. When I understood what I was part of, I left. I took nothing with me, no money, no cattle, nothing that was not mine." He paused. "But I knew where Holloway kept his private accounts, and he had cheated a number of smaller ranchers out of their savings in a land deal that left them with nothing. I arranged for those accounts to be found by the right people. There was a restitution settlement. Several of those ranchers received significant payments." "And you received," she said. "The satisfaction of knowing," he said. She looked at him. "And the money to buy the double K." "I had saved every dollar I earned for 3 years," he said. "Legitimately, I lived on almost nothing." He glanced at her. "And a small inheritance from my grandfather who died in 1876. "The town thinks you stole it," she said. "The town thinks many things," he said. "I find that correcting every wrong assumption is exhausting and ultimately unnecessary. The people who matter know." She thought about that. "I believe you," she said. He looked at her directly. "Why?" "Because I read people," she said. "It is the most useful skill I have, and you read honest." They slept in the camp with Oliver's rifle close to hand and Dutch, and Gideon hobbled near the gully, where they could be heard if anything disturbed them. And the night passed without event, except for the coyotes in the distance, and the extraordinary silence of the plains that is never really silence, but only the absence of human noise. On the second day, they crossed the edge of Oliver's knowledge of the terrain and entered country that neither of them had traveled. He navigated by a combination of map, compass, and the instinctive reading of landscape that comes from years of working outdoors, and she found herself watching the way he did this with an attention that she recognized as something beyond practical interest. She was falling in love with him. She admitted this to herself somewhere in the middle of the second afternoon, with the matter-of-fact honesty she tried to apply to important things, the same honesty with which she had acknowledged her fear. She was falling in love with Oliver Kendrick, and the timing was extraordinary, and the circumstances were not ideal, and she was going to feel it anyway, because she had never been good at not feeling what was true. On the evening of the second day, they nearly walked into trouble. They were approaching a crossroads where the southern trail met the old cattle drive route, and Oliver slowed Gideon without a word, his attention fixed on something ahead that Anna could not yet resolve. She pulled Dutch alongside him and looked, and then she saw it too, horses at the tree line, 3 of them, and men beside them, not in the casual posture of people resting but in the alert, watchful posture of people waiting. "Do you recognize them?" she breathed. "One of them is wearing a black coat," he said very quietly. She felt the cold go through her. "They knew the route," she said. "Or they guessed it," he said. There are only 2 ways to make time between Redemption Creek and Abilene if you are traveling light: the main road and this trail. He was already turning Gideon slowly, without sudden movement, without anything that would draw attention from 300 yards. "We are going north." Going north meant adding a day to the journey and crossing terrain that was rougher and less certain, but it meant not crossing those men at the tree line, and it meant, as Oliver pointed out in the pragmatic tone he used for threat assessment, that Dodd and his companion did not know which route they had ultimately taken, which meant they would have to split their resources to cover both options. They rode north until darkness made it unsafe, and then camped without a fire, eating cold provisions by starlight, and Anna sat with her knees drawn to her chest and the cedar box in her lap and felt the full weight of what she was carrying, not only the ledger but all of it, the fear and the responsibility and the loneliness of having carried something this large alone for so long. Oliver sat down beside her without ceremony, close enough that his shoulder was against hers. "Tell me what you are thinking," he said. "I am thinking that I should have found a way to do this alone," she said, "that I had no right to put you in this." "You did not put me in anything," he said. "I walked in on my own." "You did not know what it involved when you offered," she said. "No," he conceded, "but I knew enough about you to know it would be something serious, and I made the choice with that understanding." He paused. "I am not a man who makes choices he regrets." "You do not regret this." He was quiet for a moment in the way that meant he was choosing his words precisely. "Anna," he said, and it was the first time he had used her name without the formal prefix, and the sound of it, just her name in his voice, did something to the region of her sternum. "The double K is a good life. I have built something real and I am proud of it. But for 7 years I have been living inside a life that is entirely of my own construction, according to my own plans, on my own timeline. There is a kind of freedom in that and also a kind of narrowness." He looked at her in the starlight and his expression was not performing anything. It was simply what it was. "You have made the world feel larger again. That is not a thing I regret." She did not say what she wanted to say, which was that she had been feeling the same way. She said instead, "We should sleep. We have a long day tomorrow." He nodded and arranged himself on his bedroll a respectful distance from her, and she lay looking at the extraordinary Texas sky, and sometime around midnight, she reached a full, clear understanding of the fact that she had been living in hiding for so long, hiding from the danger and hiding from anything that could hurt her, that she had very nearly hidden herself out of the capacity for a life at all. The ledger was important. The information in it would matter to real people. But it was not the only thing that mattered. It was not even the most important thing about the next 8 days. On the 4th day, they found an unexpected ally. His name was Samuel Drift, and he was a former U.S. Marshal now farming 60 acres near a water source called Coyote Springs. A lean, dry-humored man in his 60s with a white beard and eyes that had seen enough that nothing surprised them. Oliver knew him by reputation, and Drift knew Oliver the same way, and when Anna explained the situation, Drift listened with the professional attention of a man who had spent years evaluating information for credibility. "I know the name Callum Brace," Drift said. "He made enemies when he was county clerk in 1878. He also made powerful friends. He is the kind of man who builds protection before he needs it." "The ledger names the protection," Anna said. Drift looked at the ledger for a measured amount of time, turning pages without comment, his expression neutral in the specific way of a man who is maintaining composure about something that disturbs him. "Judge Hartwick is the circuit judge in Abilene," he said, closing the ledger and returning it to her with care. "He is a good man, incorruptible in the specific, valuable sense that he has been offered enough to be corrupted and has not been." He looked at Oliver. "You are 3 days from Abilene on this route. You need to move without stopping longer than necessary. These men who are following, how organized are they?" "2 that I know of," Anna said. "Possibly more." "Brace has money," Drift said. 2 is not the number he would send for something this important. I would count on more." He was quiet for a moment and then he said, "I will ride with you to Abilene." "You are not obligated," Oliver said. "No," Drift agreed. "But I was a federal officer for 22 years, and what is in that ledger is exactly the thing I spent those years trying to prevent. I find I am not ready to be finished with that work." He stood up, moving with the economical ease of a man who has kept himself in deliberate condition. "I have a horse that will keep pace with yours. Give me an hour." They gave him an hour. The next 3 days were the most sustained tension Anna had experienced, and she had experienced a considerable amount over the past month. They traveled fast and varied their stopping points, never camping near water sources that would be obvious on a map, always choosing high ground where they could see approaching movement in 3 directions. Drift was an invaluable addition, not only for the safety of numbers, but for his knowledge of the terrain between Coyote Springs and Abilene, which he had ridden professionally for 2 decades. On the 5th day of travel, Oliver rode beside her for a long stretch of afternoon, and they fell into a conversation that began about the geology of the country they were crossing and migrated, in the way conversations do when both people are paying genuine attention to larger things. He asked her about her parents, and she told him about the fever, the particular cruelty of a disease that took 2 healthy adults in 8 days, and about her sister Elizabeth, who had married a pharmacist in Kansas City and had 2 children and a life that was safe and ordinary, and that Anna respected without wanting. "What do you want?" Oliver asked, and it was a direct question without any pretense of indirection, the kind he was increasingly willing to ask. She thought about it honestly. "I want to teach," she said. "I am genuinely good at it and it matters to me. I want a house that is mine, not a rented room. I want enough space for a garden because my mother kept a garden and I understand that impulse now in a way I did not when I was young." She paused. "I want someone to read with." He looked at her. "Read with," he repeated. "Not only reading the same books," she said. "Reading together, arguing about what the books mean, sharing the ones that matter." She looked out at the plains. "I have done almost everything important in my life alone. I'm not certain I want to continue doing it that way." He was quiet for a while. "I have 800 acres," he said, "and a house with a wall of bookshelves and a south-facing window that gets good light in the afternoon." She did not look at him immediately. "Is that an observation or an invitation?" she said. "I am not sure yet," he said. "I am working up to it." She almost smiled. "Let me know when you get there," she said. On the 6th night, the trouble they had been outrunning arrived. They had made camp in a dry creek bed that offered concealment from 3 sides, with Drift taking first watch and Oliver, and Anna attempting to sleep before the second watch at midnight. Anna was lying in her bedroll, not sleeping, listening to the silence and the small sounds that differentiate it from true quiet, when she heard Drift's low whistle, the specific pattern they had agreed meant movement, not emergency but attention. She was on her feet before she was entirely awake, cedar box in hand by pure instinct, and Oliver was already standing, rifle in hand, moving toward the rim of the creek bed with the controlled speed of a man who has trained himself not to run where walking will do. There were riders, 4 of them, not 3, moving along the high ground to the north at a pace that suggested purposefulness rather than patrol. Drift was at the rim with his field glass, a military-issue instrument that had survived his career, and he passed it to Oliver without comment. Oliver watched for a long moment and then lowered the glass. "Dodd," he said quietly, "and 3 others. They are moving east." "They are ahead of us," Drift said, "which means they have given up the trail and are riding to Abilene directly to wait." Anna processed this. "They know where we are going," she said. "Or they know where the ledger is going," Drift said. "To a federal court. It is the only destination that matters. If they reach Abilene before us and communicate with whoever Brace has there," Oliver said, "the value of the ledger diminishes. Judge Hartwick is good, but a good judge with his integrity questioned by a well-organized campaign of doubt is less effective than a good judge with clean authority." "Then we do not go to Abilene," Anna said. Both men looked at her. "We go around them," she said. "We go directly to the federal district office. Not the circuit court, the district office, which has permanent staff and the authority to receive evidence and issue preliminary injunctions without waiting for the circuit. It is in Austin." "Austin is further," Oliver said. "Austin is in the opposite direction from where 4 men on horseback are currently riding," Anna said. "And the district office reports directly to Washington. Brace's connections in Missouri are less useful against the federal district than they are against a circuit judge." Drift looked at her with a new quality of respect. "You know federal court procedure," he said. "Mr. Harmon's business involved considerable federal licensing," she said. "I read everything." Oliver looked at her for a long moment in the firelight, and the expression on his face was the unguarded one she had seen in the livery, the one that had not been performing anything at all. "Austin," he said. They rode south before dawn. The shift in direction added 3 days to the journey and required them to cross country that was less certain and more exposed. But the calculation was sound, and Drift agreed with it. They moved fast and rested short and ate in the saddle, and the conversation between Oliver and Anna in those 3 days became something different from what it had been, more intimate, more direct, stripped of the indirection that proximity and danger tend to dissolve. He told her about the first year on the Double K, the 2 hands who had stayed with him through a brutal winter when the pay ran low, men named Rays and Bunker who were still on the ranch now, his most trusted. He told her about a particularly cold January night when the cattle had pressed through a fence, and he had ridden for 7 hours in the dark to turn them, coming back to the ranch at 5 in the morning with his hands nearly useless from cold, and how the ranch house had been dark and there had been no one there to tell about it, and how that had felt. "Lonely," she said. "Very," he said simply. She told him about the night Harmon died, which she had not fully told anyone, the particular combination of shock and practicality that had overtaken her, the way she had moved through the necessary steps of taking the ledger and leaving the city as though operating on instructions she had not consciously written. She told him about the weeks of traveling, the false stops, the deliberate misdirections, the long night in a boarding house in Waco where she had sat with the cedar box on the table in front of her and tried to imagine a future on the other side of this. "I had not imagined a person in it," she said. "In the future I was trying to reach. I had imagined safety and work and a life, but I had not imagined a person." "And now," he said. She looked at him, this man who had ridden 6 days from his ranch, away from everything he had built, because he had decided she was worth caring about. "Now I can," she said. He reached across the distance between their horses and took her hand briefly, just a moment, and then returned it and kept riding, but the warmth of it stayed with her for the rest of that afternoon. They arrived in Austin on the 9th day of travel, rode dusty and hollow-eyed from abbreviated sleep, with Drift leading them directly to the federal district court office, a solid stone building on Congress Avenue that emanated the particular authority of institutions with genuine power. The district clerk, a precise man named Abernathy, received them in a small office and listened to a summary of the situation with the focused attention of someone who understood immediately what he was looking at. When Anna placed the ledger on his desk and he turned the first pages, she watched his expression go very careful and very still, which was the expression of a man seeing something significant. Abernathy called for a senior deputy, who called for the district attorney, and within 2 hours the ledger was in official custody, receipted to Anna with a formal document acknowledging her as the party presenting it, and preliminary inquiries had been sent by telegraph to the federal office in Washington regarding Callum Brace and the individuals named in the pages. "You are safe here," Abernathy told her. "If the men following you enter Austin and cause trouble, they are causing it inside federal jurisdiction, which changes their calculus considerably." "Will the ledger be enough?" she asked. "Miss Yates," Abernathy said, with the particular measured tone of a careful official saying something he is certain of, "this ledger is one of the most comprehensive pieces of documentary evidence I have seen in 12 years of federal service. It will be enough." She walked out of the federal district court office into the October afternoon sunlight of Austin, Texas, and the weight she had been carrying for 37 days was not entirely gone. It would take time for the investigations to conclude and the trials to proceed, but it was no longer hers to carry alone. She had set it down in the right place. Oliver was waiting on the steps, having given her the privacy of the final submission. He was leaning against the stone pillar with his hat in his hands, and when she came through the door and he saw her face, he read it correctly, as he read most things, and a slow, genuine smile spread across his features, the real one, the one she had been accumulating evidence of for 9 days, and that was better each time. "Done," he said. "Done," she said. He put his hat back on and held out his hand, and she took it. They stood on the steps of the federal district court in Austin with Drift somewhere behind them making arrangements and the city of Austin going about its business around them, and Oliver said, "I told you I was working up to an invitation." "You did say that," she said. "I have arrived," he said. She looked at him carefully. His face was serious in the way it was when he meant something exactly. "Redemption Creek is 8 miles from the Double K," he said. "The school needs a teacher. My house needs someone in it who will argue with me about books." He paused. "I need someone in it, specifically you." Another pause. "I am asking whether you would consider staying permanently as my wife if you are willing in whatever time you need to decide that." She took a breath. "You are proposing," she said. "I am attempting to," he said. "I have not done it before. I may be managing it imperfectly." "You are not managing it imperfectly," she said. "Is that an answer?" "I'm working up to one," she said, and he laughed, a full, unguarded sound that she had not heard from him before, and it was wonderful. "Take whatever time you need," he said. "Oliver," she said. "Yes." "Yes," she said. The ride back to Redemption Creek took 6 days, because they were not running from anything and they were not racing toward a deadline, and they took the southern trail at a pace that allowed for genuine attention to the country they were moving through, the wide sky, and the particular quality of the light at different hours, the way the land changed color as the angle shifted. Drift rode with them for the first 2 days and then turned north toward Coyote Springs, departing with a brief handshake for Oliver and a precise nod for Anna that contained, she thought, everything he might have said at length if he were a different kind of man. She and Oliver talked for 6 days with the accumulated ease of people who have established trust through difficulty, and now have space to enjoy what they have built. She learned things she had not known, that he could not carry a tune but knew every word of a considerable number of hymns from a childhood in a church-going household in Missouri, a detail that delighted her. That he had a dog at the ranch, an elderly hound named Justice, who had approximately 1 functional eye, and the serene confidence of an animal that has long since established its household position. That he had taught himself to read French with a grammar book and 2 French novels he had ordered through the Abilene bookshop, and that his French was, by his own assessment, technically correct and probably incomprehensible to actual French people. She told him about things she had not told anyone in years, about the summer she was 16 and had decided she was going to be an actress, a decision that had lasted 4 months and that her mother had handled with enormous strategic patience. About her particular and specific love of mathematics, which surprised people because they expected it not to fit with the poetry, but which she maintained were the same impulse, the search for the underlying structure of things. About the small journal she had kept since she was 12, currently in the traveling bag on Dutch's saddle, which she had never shown to anyone. "Would you?" he asked. "Maybe," she said. "Eventually." "I can wait," he said. They arrived in Redemption Creek on a Friday morning in mid-October, riding in from the east with the rising sun at their backs and the town just beginning to wake around them, the cook fires and the early risers and the horses in the livery starting their day. Mrs. Pratt was on the steps of the Picots' Arms when they came down the main street, and she looked at them with her careful, assessing eyes for a long moment and then said, without preamble, "Well, that took long enough." "Good morning, Mrs. Pratt," Oliver said. "Humph," said Mrs. Pratt, which Anna had learned to read as affectionate. Word traveled through Redemption Creek at the speed that news always travels through small places, which is to say almost instantaneously, and with a comprehensiveness of detail that suggested the town had been waiting for exactly this to happen. Oliver Kendrick was back from wherever he had been, and he had brought the new teacher back with him, and they were engaged to be married, and Mrs. Eunice Pratt had been seen smiling, which the residents of Redemption Creek agreed was the clearest possible confirmation. Oliver went back to the Double K that afternoon, because the ranch had been without its owner for 9 days, and there were things that needed his attention, and he rode out with the promise to return on Sunday, and Anna watched him go from the window of the Picots' Arms with the warm, slightly stunned feeling of a person who has arrived somewhere they had not known they were looking for. She taught school the following Monday with a lightness in her chest that the students noticed and correctly attributed to a good state of general being, and at least 2 of the older girls exchanged significant glances that she pretended not to see. Oliver came back Sunday with flowers, a slightly impractical gesture in West Texas in October that she found enormously moving, and with Justice the Hound, who rode in the back of a borrowed wagon with the dignity of an animal accustomed to consideration, and who assessed Anna with his one functional eye, and then placed his gray muzzle in her lap with the decision-making speed of an entity that knows what it likes. "He likes you," Oliver said, with evident satisfaction. "He is wonderful," she said, scratching behind the dog's ears. "He is 17 and his left eye has been gone since 1877 and he smells like a very old rug," Oliver said. "But yes, he is wonderful." The wedding was planned for the 2nd week of November, which gave them nearly a month, and Anna threw herself into the planning with the organized efficiency of someone who approaches all things with structure, which meant the Reverend Hughes at the small Baptist church had a detailed schedule within 4 days, and Helen Macready had offered her kitchen for the preparation of food with an enthusiasm that suggested she had been waiting for exactly this occasion for some time. October moved through its latter half with a quality that Anna would later think of as the happiest period of her life up to that point, though it would not remain the happiest indefinitely. She taught school and Oliver worked the ranch, and they saw each other 3 or 4 times each week, sometimes in town, and sometimes she would ride out to the Double K in the late afternoons when the school day was done, and they would sit on the covered porch with the light going long and orange over the land, drinking coffee that Oliver made in a way she was gradually persuading him could be improved, and reading and talking, and simply being present in the same space. He kept his word about being someone to argue with about books. She won the argument about whether Dickens was sentimental in a productive or merely self-indulgent way. He won the argument about whether the geology of the Edwards Plateau was more interesting than the flora. She conceded on the grounds that she had not actually been paying sufficient attention to the geology, which was not a concession she made lightly. The word from Austin arrived in the third week of October, via a telegram to the Federal Post Office in Redemption Creek, addressed to Miss Anna Yates. The preliminary investigation of Callum Brace had resulted in the suspension of his senatorial campaign and the impoundment of his financial records. 3 of the individuals named in the ledger had already retained legal counsel. The district attorney in Austin had commended the quality of the documentary evidence and indicated that prosecutions were anticipated to proceed in the spring session of 1883. She read the telegram at the post office with her hands very still and her eyes moving through the careful official language, and then she folded it and put it in the pocket of her skirt and walked to the livery and borrowed Dutch and rode out to the Double K without stopping to think about it. Oliver was at the corral when she arrived, running a 2-year-old heifer that needed assessment for the coming breeding season, and he saw her coming across the flat and handed the lead rope to one of his hands and came to meet her at the fence. She gave him the telegram. He read it, folded it, gave it back. "It is over," she said. "Not entirely," he said with his characteristic precision. "The prosecutions will take time, but the danger is over. Yes." She had been prepared for tears, or for a great wash of relief, or for something appropriately dramatic. What she felt was quieter than that, a slow, deep settling, as though something that had been braced against a pressure for a long time was releasing muscle by muscle, layer by layer. "I am safe," she said, and heard how foreign the word sounded in that simple, declarative form. "You are safe," he confirmed and opened his arms. She walked into them, the first time she had allowed herself to, and he folded her in with the careful sureness of a man who has thought about this moment and intends to do it properly. And she put her face against his chest and breathed and let herself feel safe, genuinely and without reservation, for the first time in months. He held her for a long time without speaking. When she pulled back to look at him, his face was doing the thing it did when he was feeling something deeply and had not yet decided how to express it, that particular internal quality of attention. "You know," she said, "you could tell me what you are thinking." "I am thinking," he said, "that this is the best thing that has happened to me in a very long time, possibly ever." "The telegram," she said. "You," he said, "on my land, looking at me like that." "Like what?" she said. "Like you are planning to stay," he said. She reached up and touched the side of his face with her hand, a gesture she had been wanting to make for weeks. "I am absolutely planning to stay," she said. The wedding was on the second Saturday of November, 1882, in the small Baptist church in Redemption Creek, with Reverend Hughes presiding in his best coat and every soul in town who could fit in the building present, along with a considerable number who could not and stood outside the open door in the mild November morning. Helen Macready had organized the flowers, dried autumn wildflowers in pale yellows and deep reds, and she had also, characteristically, organized everyone else, so that the ceremony proceeded with a smoothness that Reverend Hughes privately attributed to divine providence, but that the congregation attributed to Mrs. Macready. Anna wore a dress of deep blue wool that she had ordered from San Antonio, because she had decided that the occasion warranted a new dress specifically chosen, not adapted from something she already owned. Oliver wore his good gray coat and a white shirt that he had ironed himself, which Helen Macready told Anna about afterward with a fond exasperation that suggested she had tried to offer help and been politely but firmly declined. Standing before Reverend Hughes with Oliver's hands holding hers, she was aware of the specific gravity of the moment, this formal declaration of what had been building between them since the first afternoon in Calloway's store, the way a thing that has been becoming suddenly becomes. She said the words clearly and without hesitation, and Oliver said his with the same deliberate care he brought to everything, his amber eyes on her face throughout. When Reverend Hughes pronounced them married and Oliver leaned down to kiss her, the church made the particular collective sound of a community genuinely pleased, warm and unceremonious and real. And Justice the Hound, who had been tied outside and could apparently hear through the wall, let out a prolonged howl that the Reverend, to his credit, incorporated into the proceedings with considerable grace. The celebration afterward in the yard of the Pico's Arms involved Helen Macready's cooking, and a fiddle player named Crane, who appeared from somewhere near the dusty Ace, with an instrument and a repertoire sufficiently broad to cover the afternoon. And there was dancing in the street as the sun went down, the informal, exuberant kind that does not require a formal floor or any instruction, just people moving to music because the day calls for it. Oliver danced with her, which surprised her because he had said earlier in the week that he did not dance. But when the fiddle started, he held out his hand with a slight inclination of his head and a look that said he had reconsidered, and she took the hand, and they danced in the street of Redemption Creek in the November evening with the stars beginning to appear and the town around them doing the same. "I thought you did not dance," she said. "I said I do not dance," he said. "I did not say I was incapable of it." She leaned her head briefly against his shoulder, just for a moment, just because she could. They moved to the Double K that weekend. She had very little, the traveling bag and the cedar box, which was empty now and which she kept because it had been the container of the most important thing she had ever done, and a crate of books from Mrs. Pratt that had arrived at the school as gifts from various members of the community over the 2 months she had taught there, an accumulation she had not anticipated. Oliver carried the books in and put them on the shelves beside his own, mixing them together without ceremony, and stood back and looked at the combined collection with a satisfaction that she recognized as the domestic equivalent of a man surveying a productive field. "Better," he said. "Much better," she agreed. Mrs. Pratt, at the departure from the Pico's Arms, had embraced Anna with the concise efficiency of a woman who expresses affection physically only when she means it to count, and said into her ear, "He is a good man. They are rarer than they ought to be. Do not let him be anything except exactly himself, and you will both be fine." She had then released Anna and become brisk and organizational in a way that was clearly designed to prevent any sentimental lingering. The autumn deepened into winter, and the Double K in winter had a quality entirely different from what Anna had seen of it in the softer months. The land went spare and clean, the grasses flattened to a pale gold, the ridges standing out sharp against the wide sky, the mornings brilliant and cold in a way that made the warmth of the house feel like something earned. She taught school through November and December and was good at it, and knew she was good at it, which was its own particular satisfaction. And she rode home in the late afternoons to the house that was hers now, where Oliver would be somewhere on the ranch or at his desk in the study, with the papers of the operation spread out in the organized system he had developed over years. And Justice would hear her before anyone else and begin his arthritis-load migration toward the door. The winter evenings were what she had described to Oliver in those days of travel between Coyote Springs and Austin, the thing she had said she wanted. They read by the lamp, separately and then sharing, arguing about the books in the warm, engaged way of people who genuinely care about ideas. He read things she gave him with the thorough attention he brought to everything. She read the geological survey he pressed on her and became, to her own mild surprise, genuinely interested in the formation history of the Edwards Plateau. In December, she wrote to her sister Elizabeth in Kansas City, a long letter, the first honest communication she had managed since leaving St. Louis, explaining the abbreviated version of the past months and the unabbreviated fact of her marriage. Elizabeth's reply arrived in January and was 3 pages of sisterly emotion, interrogation, and an expressed determination to visit as soon as the weather permitted, which Anna read aloud to Oliver, and he received with the composed readiness of a man who has mentally prepared for exactly this. Elizabeth Yates arrived in March, with her husband Martin and their 2 children, by the southbound stage, and she stepped off it and saw Anna standing in the street, and they held each other for a considerable time, the way people hold each other when the time between has contained too much to summarize. Elizabeth liked Oliver immediately, which was not a foregone conclusion, because Elizabeth was protective in the way of older sisters who have had cause to be, and she watched him the way she watched everything, carefully and without sentimentality. What she saw satisfied her, the way he listened when Anna spoke, the way he made space for her authority in every practical matter relating to the house and the teaching, the way he looked at her when he thought no one else was watching. "He looks at you like you are the most interesting thing in the landscape," Elizabeth told Anna privately on the second evening of the visit. "The Edwards Plateau is genuinely interesting," Anna said. "Anna," Elizabeth said, with the patience of a woman who has known her younger sister for 24 years. "Yes," Anna said, smiling. "I know." Spring came to the Double K with a suddenness that was characteristic of West Texas, the land going from spare to vivid in what felt like a week, the wildflowers coming up between the grasses in yellows and pale pinks, and the deep purple of the bluebonnets that Oliver told her were technically a legume, and that she told him that knowing that did not make them less beautiful. She planted a kitchen garden along the south wall of the house, something she had wanted since before she arrived, tomatoes and green beans, and the particular variety of summer squash that her mother had grown, seeds for which she had obtained from Helen McCready, who had obtained them from a woman in San Antonio who had obtained them, apparently, from someone in Mexico, and the provenance of which made them taste, in Anna's opinion, like continuity. The news from Austin continued to arrive through the spring, formal legal communications addressed to Anna Yates Kendrick, advising her of the progress of the federal prosecutions. Callum Brace was indicted in March on 4 counts of fraud and conspiracy. The federal land agent named in the ledger resigned his position and entered a plea agreement in April. 2 of the state legislators had retained counsel and were contesting the charges, but the district attorney in Austin was confident in the documentary evidence and communicated as much in a formal letter that Anna kept in the cedar box alongside the receipt from the district clerk. Dodd was located in El Paso in February and charged with conspiracy and intimidation, charges that the federal prosecutor had assembled from evidence she had provided in her affidavit. She did not feel triumph at this exactly, more a sense of resolution, the closing of a circuit. "It is finished," she told Oliver when the final update arrived. "Yes," he said, and did not feel the need to add more. She was expecting their first child by April, a discovery she had made in late February with a mixture of joy and the particular form of physical astonishment that pregnancy announces itself with, and that she told Oliver on a Sunday morning when the light was coming through the south-facing window in the way she loved, and Justice was sleeping by the stove with his ancient, uncomplicated peace. Oliver sat very still for a moment, and then he said her name, just her name, the way he had said it that first night in the barn among the anxiety, with that particular quality of meaning everything, and he put his hand over hers on the table, and she could see that he was moved beyond his usual composure, that this had reached somewhere deep and genuine in him. "Are you happy?" she asked, though she could see that he was. "I am the happiest I have been in my life," he said, with simple, direct honesty. "And that is a statement I do not make carelessly." "I know," she said. "That is why I believe it. The summer of 1883 was warm and full and good." She taught through the end of the school year in May, and then rested through the pregnancy with the particular combination of impatience and contentment that is characteristic of active people forced into stillness, gardening as long as she reasonably could, reading through Oliver's geological survey with a genuine investment that she suspected he found quietly delightful. He was solicitous without being excessive about it, which was exactly what she needed, checking on her without hovering, making practical provisions without making her feel fragile. Their son was born in the first week of August, in the bedroom of the Double K Ranch house with Helen McCready in attendance and Reverend Hughes's wife, who had midwifery experience, and Oliver present throughout, which was not entirely customary but which no one in the room felt able to suggest should be otherwise, partly because he was clearly going to stay, and partly because his presence was, in fact, calming. He held Anna's hand through the hardest hours and did not look away, and did not offer false reassurance, only the steady, reliable warmth of being there. They named the boy James, for Oliver's grandfather whose inheritance had contributed to the Double K's founding, and he was from his first hours a deliberate, observant child, the kind who watches the world with a focused attention that makes people check their behavior, and who slept with the total commitment of someone who has decided that whatever they do, they will do it completely. Oliver held his son for the first time with the particular stillness of a large, contained man, encountering something that requires an entirely different kind of care from anything he has previously handled, and what moved across his face in that moment was something Anna stored carefully in the part of her memory reserved for the things she intended to keep. "He is remarkable," Oliver said. "He is 2 hours old," Anna said from the pillow. "Remarkably formed, then," Oliver said, not taking his eyes off the baby. Anna laughed softly because she was tired and because she was happy and because this man she had married consistently made her want to. The autumn of 1883 brought another letter, this one from the federal district attorney in Austin, advising her that the trials of the principal defendants in the Brace corruption case had concluded. Callum Brace had been convicted on all 4 counts and sentenced to 7 years in the federal penitentiary. The federal land agent had received a reduced sentence pursuant to his cooperation. The 2 state legislators had been convicted on lesser charges. It was, the district attorney wrote, one of the most significant corruption prosecutions in Missouri and Texas federal history in recent memory, and the quality of the documentary evidence had been essential to its success. She read the letter twice and then folded it and put it in the cedar box. Oliver found her in the garden an hour later, turning the soil in the late afternoon where she had pulled up the finished summer squash, James asleep in a basket in the shade of the house, Justice lying nearby in the specific position of a dog who is elderly and arthritic, but has determined that proximity to the baby is worth the effort of relocation. "The letter from Austin," Oliver said. "It is over," she said, and heard the fullness of it this time, complete and certain, without the tentativeness of the first time she had said those words on the steps in Austin. Truly over. He came into the garden and stood beside her with the afternoon light on both of them and the land of the Double K around them and their son sleeping in the shade. "Then everything you came here carrying," he said, "you have set down." "Everything I came here carrying," she said, "I have set down." He was quiet for a moment, and then he said, in the way he said things that mattered to him, carefully and without performing them, "What is left?" She looked at him. At this man she had whispered her fear to, in the dark of the barn on a September night that felt simultaneously very close and very far away. At the man who had said without hesitation, "Hold on to me," and who had meant it in every way a person can mean a thing like that. "Everything else," she said. "The good things, the long things, the things that take a lifetime." He smiled, the real one, the full one, and put his arm around her shoulders, and she leaned into his side. In the years that followed, the Double K grew, and the family inside it grew alongside it. Justice the Hound lived to the remarkable age of 19, before he died peacefully by the stove in the winter of 1884, and Oliver buried him at the edge of the garden, with the seriousness the occasion warranted. And Anna planted a rose bush there in the spring because roses are stubborn and persistent and seem, in that way, exactly right for honoring something that has been reliably present. Their second child, a daughter they named Clara, arrived in 1885, with the same careful, watchful quality as her brother, and a set of opinions about her circumstances that she began expressing at a remarkably early age and never stopped. James, by this point a 3-year-old with his father's deliberate attention, and his mother's unnerving ability to assess a situation, regarded his sister with a solemnity that made Helen Macready say he looked like a small professor, which was not entirely inaccurate. Anna returned to teaching in the fall of 1884, by which point the school had 29 pupils, and a second teacher had been hired to assist, a young woman from San Antonio named Miss Reyes, whose enthusiasm and organizational ability reminded Anna of herself at the start, and who she mentored with the careful attention of someone who has thought about what support would have helped her. The school grew, and the curriculum grew with it, adding basic mathematics and geography to the reading and writing and the history, all of it administered with the structured creativity of a woman who had never stopped finding the work genuinely meaningful. Oliver expanded the Double K's operation in 1885 and 1886, adding a quarter section to the north, and increasing the herd and hiring 3 additional hands, men he chose with his characteristic care for character, alongside competence. The ranch became what he had been building it toward from the beginning, not simply a profitable cattle operation, but a kind of community anchor, the kind of place that people in the surrounding country knew as a reference point, dependable and consistent. He and Anna continued to argue about books, which was one of their shared pleasures, and which never resolved into agreement on everything, because they were both too interested in their own perspectives to concede ground lightly. She eventually showed him the journal, on a winter evening by the lamp when James was asleep and Clara was a new presence in the room adjoining theirs, and he read it with the complete attention he gave all things, and when he looked up his eyes were bright in the lamplight with something honest and unconstrained. "You should write," he said. "More than this, you should write for other people." "Teachers write," she said. "Lesson plans and curriculum and letters." "That is not what I mean," he said. "I know what you mean," she said. She began writing, eventually, in the quiet of the mornings before the household fully woke, at the desk in the study that had become as much hers as his, the large south-facing window letting in the early light that was good for thinking. She wrote about what she knew, the land and the school and the particular quality of life in a place where the distances are real, and the isolation is either freedom or prison depending on what you bring to it. She wrote about the women she had observed making lives in difficult country, with the creative persistence of people who do not have the luxury of giving up. She wrote about the injustice she had seen, the land corruption that had hurt ordinary families, the way power operated through networks of protected self-interest, without sentimentality but without looking away. She sent pieces of her writing to the San Antonio Light, and 3 of them were published in 1887, which delighted her and astonished Oliver in a way he tried to express adequately and acknowledged he had not quite managed. Their 3rd child, a son named Henry, arrived in the spring of 1888, a red-faced, vigorous infant with a set of opinions about his comfort that he expressed at considerable volume, a temperamental contrast to his careful older siblings that James regarded with philosophical equanimity, and Clara regarded as interesting data. Oliver, holding this new son in the ranch house kitchen in the April morning, said to Anna with the kind of love that has had years to deepen from the first bright burn into something steady and enormous and reliable, "We are very lucky people." "Extraordinarily," she agreed. "I want you to know," he said and paused. "Tell me," she said from the bed, watching him with the particular attention she had always brought to watching him, because he was always worth attention. "I want you to know," he said, "that every single part of this, you and the children and the ranch and the books and the arguments and the garden, every part of it, is more than I knew how to want before you." She felt the fullness of it, this man who chose his words with precision and therefore meant each one of them fully. "I came here running away from something," she said quietly, "and I found everything I was supposed to be running toward." He crossed the room and sat on the edge of the bed, and she leaned against him, and he put his arm around her and Henry between them, seemed to decide that the situation was acceptable and quieted into contentment. The Double K stood on the Texas land for decades after that, growing and changing and remaining recognizable, the kind of place that accumulates meaning through years of being inhabited by people who love it. The garden along the south wall outlasted Anna's mother's seeds and became its own established thing, passed through cuttings and careful attention. The wall of books grew until it occupied 2 walls and part of the hallway, and the arguments about them continued without resolution, because resolution was never the point. The children grew, and the ranch grew, and the town of Redemption Creek grew, and through all of it Oliver and Anna Kendrick remained the steady center of their own life together, a love that had begun in the specific urgency of danger and fear, in a dark barn with a whispered truth, and had become, in the living of years together, the particular extraordinary ordinary thing that is a long and devoted life, shared by 2 people who chose each other fully. Many years later, when Clara was grown and teaching at the school herself, having inherited her mother's gift and her own considerable additions to it, and James was managing the north portion of the ranch with his father's deliberate attention to detail, and Henry was at the agricultural college in Austin and writing letters home that were funny and somewhat chaotic and clearly his own, Anna sat on the covered porch of the Double K in the long light of an autumn afternoon with Oliver beside her, and thought about the evening she had arrived in Redemption Creek with 1 bag and 1 locked box, and a secret she did not know how to set down. She had been terrified. She had been absolutely alone in the terror, and then she had not been alone anymore. "I think about that barn sometimes," she said, and did not need to explain which barn or which night. "So do I," he said. "I was so frightened," she said. "I know," he said. "You told me. And you said hold on to me," she said. "And you did," he said. She looked out at the land they had made their home, the familiar ridgeline to the north, the garden she had tended for years, the corrals where Oliver's horses moved in the late afternoon calm, all of it so entirely known and entirely hers, and she felt the love for it, and for the man beside her as something as natural and constant as breath. "I have not let go," she said. He reached over and took her hand just the way he had reached across the space between their horses on the ride south, briefly and with certainty. "Good," he said. "Do not." The autumn light stretched long over the Double K, and they sat together in the quiet that was never truly quiet but only the particular sound of everything they had built, and it was exactly enough. It was more than enough. It was everything.